The night had a way of swallowing sound in Laramie Hollow. The tiny town sat tucked between rolling plains and whispering cottonwoods, where the wind carried dust and ghosts in equal measure. Lanterns flickered along the main street, their weak glow cutting through the dark like trembling fireflies. It was a lonely kind of silence, the sort that made a person listen to their own heartbeat just to know they were still alive. Clara Jennings walked with her head down, the hem of her faded blue dress brushing against her boots. In her hands, she held a small wicker basket filled with flour, coffee, and a single bar of soap, luxuries she'd saved 2 weeks to afford. Her shawl was too thin for the chill, and she drew it tighter, glancing now and then over her shoulder. Since her husband had died, every shadow looked like trouble waiting to happen. The widow had been many things in her 30 years, wife, homemaker, nurse during the fever season, but brave had never been one of them. Yet here she was, braving the empty streets long after dark because her pantry was bare. She would have gone earlier, but the woman who kept the general store closed early that day for her son's birthday. So Clara waited, and when the sun dipped below the hills, she told herself she could make the short trip before the saloon crowd spilled out into the street. She was wrong. As she crossed in front of the saloon, laughter burst from the open doors, raucous, mean laughter that made her stomach twist. She quickened her pace, eyes fixed on the far end of the street where her little cabin waited in the dark. Her boots scuffed softly against the wooden walkway. She was almost past when a harsh voice cut through the noise. "Well, looky here," a man drawled. "Ain't often a pretty widow walks by after sundown." Clara froze. Her fingers tightened around the basket handle until it creaked. She didn't look back. Maybe if she just kept walking. "Hey, I'm talking to you, sweetheart." A boot step thudded behind her, then another. Panic crawled up her throat. She broke into a quick walk, but they followed. When she turned the corner by the blacksmith's, she saw the street ahead was empty, too empty. Only the faint yellow glow from a few shuttered windows. No one to call for help. 3 men came after her, swaggering with the slow, careless steps of the drunk and cruel. She recognized them vaguely, railroad workers who spent most nights in the saloon and most days nursing hangovers. The tallest of the 3 grinned through missing teeth. "Now, don't run off, missus. We just wanna talk. I've got no business with you," she managed, her voice trembling. "That's so." The second one, a red-faced man with a greasy beard, stepped closer. "Maybe we make it our business." Clara backed away until her spine hit the side of a wagon. The men fanned out, boxing her in. The smell of whiskey was thick in the air, sharp enough to sting her nose. One reached for her shawl, tugging playfully. "What's the rush? You lonely out here all by yourself?" "Please," she whispered, clutching the fabric to her chest. "Let me go." The tallest man chuckled low. "Ain't no one around to stop us, darlin'." Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. For a fleeting second, she thought about her husband, Eli Jennings, who used to walk her home every evening with his arm around her shoulders. If he were here, these men wouldn't dare. But Eli was buried on a hill outside town, and she was alone. Completely alone. The first man reached for her again, and something in Clara snapped. She swung her basket hard, the corner striking his cheek. He cursed, staggering back, and the contents spilled, flour and coffee scattering like spilled sand. "You little..." Before he could finish, a voice rang out, low and calm but carrying through the night like thunder. "That's enough." The men turned, squinting into the dark. A figure stood at the far end of the street, framed by the glow of the saloon light. Tall, broad-shouldered, coat dusty from the trail. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face, but the glint of his belt buckle in the shape of a revolver at his hip told the story clear enough. He took another step forward, boots crunching slow and steady on the gravel. "Step away from the lady." One of the drunkards laughed nervously. "Who the hell are you supposed to be?" The man didn't answer. He just kept walking, the moonlight catching on the steel of his gun. For the first time all night, Clara felt something shift, the tension in the air breaking like a snapped wire. The stranger stopped a few paces away, his voice quiet but deadly certain. The moment the cowboy stepped into the glow of the lanterns, the air in the street changed. The wind stilled, the laughter from the saloon faded, and even the drunkard seemed to sober a little at the sight of him. His boots struck the dirt in slow, steady rhythm, each step deliberate, heavy with warning. He wasn't rushing, and that somehow made him more dangerous. Clara's eyes darted toward him, taking in every detail through her fear-clouded vision. The man was tall, broad in the shoulders, and carried himself like someone who'd been on both sides of trouble and lived to tell about it. His hat was pulled low, shadowing a face weathered by sun and miles. The long duster coat he wore looked worn but well kept, and his revolver sat in a leather holster that was scuffed smooth from use. This wasn't a man who played at being a cowboy, he was the real thing. The three drunkards shifted uncertainly. The tallest one, who had a cut on his cheek from Clara's basket, spat on the ground. "You best keep ridin', friend. Ain't your concern." The cowboy stopped a few feet away, hands relaxed by his sides, but his right one hovered close to his hip. "It became my concern the second you laid a hand on her," he said, voice low and calm. "Now, you can walk away, or you can stay and find out what kind of mistake that is. That kind of stillness before a fight has a sound of its own, like a storm building far off." The men exchanged uneasy glances. They were used to pushing around farmers, clerks, maybe a shopkeeper or two, but this man was different. Something in his tone, the way he stood, told them he wasn't bluffing. Still, whiskey made fools brave. The red-faced one sneered and stepped forward, brandishing the neck of a broken bottle. "Think you're some kinda hero?" he slurred. The cowboy's expression didn't change. "No," he said softly. "Just a man who don't like cowards." That was all it took. The drunk swung. The movement that followed was fast, too fast for Clara's eyes to follow. The cowboy sidestepped, caught the man's wrist mid-swing, and twisted sharply. There was a sickening crack, a cry of pain, and the bottle hit the ground. In the same motion, the cowboy shoved him back hard. The man stumbled into his friend, knocking both of them off balance. The third one lunged from the side, knife flashing. The cowboy pivoted, grabbed the man's arm, and drove his fist into the attacker's gut. The air left his lungs in a choking gasp, and he folded like a sack of grain. Within seconds, two of them were down, groaning in the dirt. The last man, the one with the split cheek, hesitated. His eyes darted to the revolver still holstered at the stranger's side. The cowboy didn't draw, it wasn't necessary. He just looked at him, calm and steady, as though he already knew how this would end. "Try it," he said quietly. The man swallowed hard, then backed away, muttering curses as he helped his fallen friends up. The three staggered toward the saloon, limping and bleeding, disappearing into the night like beaten dogs. For a long moment, the only sound was Clara's ragged breathing and the soft creak of the cowboy's coat as he turned toward her. "You hurt, ma'am." His tone had changed now, gentle, almost apologetic. Clara shook her head, her voice caught somewhere between gratitude and shock. "No, I don't think so." He nodded slowly, removing his hat out of respect. "Name's Colt McGraw," he said. "Didn't mean to scare you none, but you shouldn't be out here alone." Clara tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. I just needed supplies. I didn't think." He gave a faint, knowing smile. "Most folks don't. Trouble finds the ones just trying to mind their business." He bent to pick up her spilled basket, brushing dust off the soap and tin of coffee. Then he crouched, gathering the scattered flour with one gloved hand, careful not to waste more than he had to. It was a small thing, but it made her chest tighten. A man who fought like the devil yet handled her groceries like they were fragile glass. When he handed the basket back, their fingers brushed. Clara felt warmth rush through her, strange and unfamiliar after so many months of loneliness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me," he said, his gaze steady. "Just promise me you won't walk this road alone again." She managed a small nod. "I can't afford to ask anyone for help." Colt's eyes softened, though his jaw stayed tight. "Then maybe you just didn't ask the right man." The words hung in the cool night air, simple yet weighted with something she didn't quite understand. He looked past her toward the cabin lights at the far end of the street. "Come on," he said quietly. "I'll see you home." And though every sensible thought told her to refuse, to not trust strangers, to keep her head down, something in his voice made her believe she was safe for the first time in a long while. So, under the moonlight of that restless little town, the widow and the cowboy began walking side by side, their shadows stretching long behind them, and fate quietly changed its course. The walk to Clara's cabin was quiet, except for the wind sighing through the cottonwoods and the steady rhythm of their footsteps on the dusty road. The town lights faded behind them, leaving only the glow of the moon to guide their way. Clara's heart was still pounding, though the danger had passed. Every time she tried to thank him again, her voice failed her. She wasn't sure what to say to a man who'd just risked his life for her. Colt McGraw walked beside her without hurry, his hands tucked into his coat pockets. He didn't speak much, just glanced at her now and then as though making sure she was truly all right. The air carried the scent of sagebrush and the faint metallic tang of gun oil from his revolver. He walked like a man used to being alone, like someone who had spent more nights on the trail than under a roof. When they reached her gate, Clara hesitated. Her cabin was small, just 2 rooms and a porch where her late husband used to sit smoking in the evenings. The windows glowed with the dim orange light of a single oil lamp. She turned to face the cowboy, her shawl fluttering lightly around her shoulders. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "Those men, they weren't worth the trouble." He tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "Ma'am, no man with a spine can stand by and watch a woman get cornered like that. Not and sleep easy after." His words hit her harder than she expected. For months, she'd been invisible, just the widow Jennings, someone to pity, someone folks nodded to in passing but never truly saw. Now this stranger had stepped in without knowing her name. "Still," she murmured, "you could have been hurt." He smiled faintly. "Wouldn't be the first time." She caught herself staring. Under the lamplight, his face was rugged but kind, the kind of face that carried stories. A faint scar traced the line of his jaw, disappearing into his stubble. He wasn't handsome in the polished sense, but there was something steady and unshakable about him. Something that made her chest ache with a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in a long while. "Colt, was it?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Yes, ma'am." "Colt McGraw, where are you headed?" He looked out toward the open plains, where the moonlight painted the horizon silver. "Nowhere in particular. Been driftin' a while. Work when I can find it, ride when I can't. So, no home." He shook his head. "Not for a long time." There was a pause, long enough for the crickets to fill it. Clara nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. "Then you and I aren't so different," she said quietly. "I used to have one too. A home, I mean. Now it's just walls and chores and silence." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "Your husband," she swallowed, her fingers tightening around her shawl. "Eli Jennings, died last spring, shot down outside the saloon over a card game he wasn't even part of." Her voice cracked, but she went on. "After that, folks tried to help. But help fades, and pity doesn't last long in a town like this." Colt's jaw tightened, his eyes dark with something she couldn't name. "I'm sorry for that," he said. "You deserved better." They stood there a moment longer, the wind whispering between them. Then, without warning, he stepped a little closer. Not enough to frighten her, just close enough that she could see the tired kindness in his eyes. "You've been fighting the world alone long enough, Clara," he said quietly. "From now on, no one lays a hand on you, or looks at you wrong, without answerin' to me." Her breath caught. "Colt, you don't even know me." He gave a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Maybe not yet, but I know the kind of woman you are. Takes strength to survive what you have. And I reckon that's worth knowin'." Something in her chest cracked open then, a mix of grief, gratitude, and something dangerously close to hope. She hadn't felt that in so long she almost didn't recognize it. She looked up at him, really looked, and saw not just a drifter or a gun hand, but a man who'd seen loss too. "Will you stay?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He studied her face, then the little cabin beyond her shoulder. "If you'll have me." She nodded once, slowly. "Then, you'll stay." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Colt reached out, his hand brushing a stray lock of hair from her face with surprising gentleness. "You've got fire in you, Clara Jennings," he said softly. "Don't let the world put it out." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she reached up and touched his hand, rough, calloused, real. The kind of touch that anchored her back to the world. The night wind rose again, sweeping through the open fields, carrying away the last of her fear. The cowboy stood on her porch, and for the first time in a year, Clara didn't feel like a ghost in her own life. In the faint light of the oil lamp, with dust still clinging to his coat and the promise of something new in his eyes, Colt McGraw tipped his hat and murmured, "Reckon you're mine to look after now, ma'am."